This is a game changer.
Tonight on the 7:30 report, Australian scientists using biological warfare to tackle a tropical killer.
In our best case scenario, it could have the potential to have a major impact on dengue globally.
That is the stone of Scone. You are trivialising everything. You trivialise...
I don't care how many royal arsenals have sat.
Listen to me! Listen to me!
And the odd couple, Geoffrey Rush, on his latest role as the colonial nobody who taught King George VI to overcome his speech impediment.
This guy was a wreck because he had no confidence. He'd been a stammerer since childhood. And the film is about the relationship between him and the speech therapist and how they become friends.
Welcome to the program, and the Wikileaks saga continues to dominate globally and in Australia. The government here moved today to play down the impact of the latest series of Wikileaks disclosures as detailed in Fairfax newspapers, exposing right-wing power broker and minister Senator Mark Arbib as a regular confidential contact of the US Embassy in Canberra. In embassy cables obtained by Wikileaks, Senator Arbib is reported as having discussed with the Americans leadership tensions between Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard well before the former Prime Minister was ousted in June. Past and present politicians and diplomats are seeking to hose this down as the normal business of diplomacy. But it's also sparked a debate on whether there's been too much subservience towards the US. Political editor Heather Hewitt.
As the WikiLeaks disclosures pour in thick and fast, leading to one titillating newspaper headline after another, Senator Mark Arbib is the latest to be outed as one featured regularly in US Embassy dispatches to Washington. There's nervousness in political ranks of all persuasions about who might be next.
I would be very surprised if the US Embassy in Canberra didn't have as frank a conversation with a very wide range of coalition parliamentarians and leaders as they do with the Labor side. And so I think a lot of people will be very reluctant to throw too many aspersions on Arbib and others, precisely because they themselves or their colleagues will be in the same boat. And they must all be opening the paper with some trepidation every morning to see whose name's up next.
I think in an immediate sense it'll probably have a chilling impact in terms of people speaking very frankly. This will happen for a while, and I think that's been damaging.
All the Australian public sees in terms of that relationship is television images like this during Hillary Clinton's recent visit here. What comes as a shock to some is that much more has been going on behind the scenes for years, including politicians dobbing on their own colleagues to the US Embassy. But in political and diplomatic circles, this is apparently considered a perfectly normal state of affairs.
I think we ought to just understand one point, that in diplomacy, every day, in diplomacy every month, in diplomacy every year, there are literally thousands, tens of thousands of conversations that take place.
It's part of the work that we do, and I don't think people should read anything at all sinister into that.
In general terms, you would expect the American embassy and other key embassies, perhaps not all embassies, but other key embassies, to cultivate relations with members of parliament. So there's nothing unusual about that. They no doubt have cultivated a relationship with Mark Arbib. He's believed to be sympathetic to America and the American alliance.
I hope that Australian diplomats in Washington are doing exactly the same to the US political system.
But while Senator Arbib's New South Wales Labor colleagues have rushed to defend him, there are question marks over whether he's been a little too zealous in passing on information to the Americans, such as forecasting a leadership challenge.
It reads to me as though he has become quite a good friend of one of the officers in the embassy, I suppose. That would be my take on it. So what he says is pretty frank stuff. I would have to say that when you're chatting away with foreign diplomats, do you want to exercise a degree of discretion?
The reason that Australia has such a close relationship with the Americans is that we work the patch consistently and constantly.
And if this extends to briefings on leadership tensions and upcoming coups, that's apparently all fair game and follows the pattern of previous political eras.
For example, In 1991, the United States Embassy in Canberra, which was very close to Prime Minister Hawke, was telling the White House Prime Minister Hawke would be the person to greet President Bush when he arrived in Canberra. The New South Wales ALP had a different view and informed the consulate in Sydney when asked the likelihood was that Paul Keating would be the Prime Minister. And so it proved to be. Prime Minister Keating greeted President Bush when he arrived.
As for Senator Arbib's role in more recent leadership developments and briefings, he issued a short statement today saying he was known as a strong supporter of Australia's relationship with the US and was an active member of the American-Australian Leadership Dialogue. This is a group of Australian and US politicians, business leaders and journalists which meets annually to privately canvass the affairs of both nations.
It does show that the Leadership Dialogue is a very effective institution in pulling together a lot of fairly significant players in the Australian political landscape to talk to their American counterparts. The trouble is, does also reflect the fact that the Leadership Dialogue itself is rather an exercise in mutual self-congratulation.
Now, this is a position that a lot of America's other allies would like to occupy. And over the years, a lot of other countries have come privately to people engaged in the dialogue and said, now, how do we have a relationship with the Americans like you have? Well, the answer is you have to work at it for half a century.
What concerns some seasoned observers is that these latest leaks reveal a relationship that could be interpreted as being a little too close, and one that fails to adequately address relations with China, for example.
I don't think there's anything inherently improper about it. I guess what's striking about it, though, is how hard people in the Labor Party, people in Australian politics in general, work at being liked by the Americans, and there's nothing wrong with being liked by the Americans, but what strikes me about what we've seen in the Wikileaks saga so far is so little evidence of us asking for something back, so little evidence of us trying to really have a serious conversation with Americans about what's important to us.
What's all too plain, no matter how those involved paint this, is that the leaks are very uncomfortable for Australia and the US.
It's embarrassing for both. It's, of course, literally embarrassing for Habib or Kevin Rudd, and no doubt there'll be plenty more people who'll be embarrassed over the next few weeks and months, not just in Australia but around the world.
There are more damaging headlines expected in Fairfax newspapers tomorrow.
Political editor Heather Hewitt. Researchers in Queensland are preparing for a biological assault on dengue fever. In the new year, they'll be releasing mosquitoes deliberately infected with a bacteria that stops dengue from spreading. It's the first part of an international program in part financed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, based on the work of Australian scientist Professor Scott O'Neill. If successful, the biological control could significantly reduce the risk of a life-threatening disease that affects tens of millions of people around the world. From North Queensland, Peter McCutcheon reports. Peter McCutcheon with that report. By any measure, Geoffrey Rush has made a remarkable contribution as an Australian actor, both at home and abroad. In terms of accolades, there's nothing more to be said, really. He's one of a handful of actors, and certainly the only Australian, to win the Triple Crown of awards, the Oscar from Hollywood, television's Emmy, and last year Broadway's Tony Award for his role in Exit the King with Australian director Neil Armfield. It all begs the question of what continues to drive him, because here he is in his 60th year with 3 films and 2 theatre productions already up for the year, another 2 films in the pipeline and various other projects in the works. And one of those films is the first film of a Patrick White novel, Eye of the Storm. This week, with long-time friend and director Neil Armfield, he opened in the revival of an old favourite, Diary of a Madman, at one of the world's smallest theatres, Sydney's Belvoir, while at the same time promoting his latest film, The King's Speech, about the eccentric Australian who cured the stammer of King George VI. I spoke with Geoffrey Rush at the Belvoir this week. Geoffrey Rush, you're in your 60th year. You've done it all by any acting standard, and you seem to be working as hard as ever, if not harder. Are you working as hard as it sounds? And a little inside info on how Geoffrey Rush developed his speaking style for the Lionel Logue role. He listened to old tapes of Sir Robert Menzies, amongst others. Incidentally, that brief excerpt from Exit the King that we played during the interview was from the original Malthouse Theatre production in Melbourne. And now for their final outing for the year, here's John Clarke and Brian Dawe.
Now, your name is Sandy, is that correct?
That's correct, yes, Sandy, yes, that's right.
And you've got a surname, Sandy?
Yes, Close.
Sandy Close.
That's right, yes.
OK, and you're in the seasonal gift delivery business, I understand?
Well, would there be kiddies watching this, would there?
Yes, there would. There'll be a family audience, of course, yes.
Yeah, we're in the festive logistics solutions area.
Aha, the festive logistics solutions.
That's right, yes.
What does that involve, Sandy?
Oh, a big warehouse, you know, plenty of equipment, some livestock, personnel, costumes.
Right, right. And you have staff, of course?
Got quite a big staff, yes.
Yeah, and who have you got working for you? Elves. Beg your pardon?
We've got some... elves.
Oh, do you want...
No, I'm just telling you who's... elves!
Oh, OK.
Working for us, yes.
OK, we'll put that down as a mixed small business, I think, shall we?
OK, yes.
OK, where are you based, Sandy?
North, quite a way north.
Northern suburbs.
Probably cover it, yes.
And a busy time of the year for you, Sandy?
Going like the clappers. We're going like the clappers right at the moment.
And who's going like the clappers?
Elves, Elves, can I have a glass of water, please?
OK, your special subject tonight is the events of 2010.
Yes.
Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Who was the Australian Prime Minister at the beginning of the year?
Kevin Rudd.
Correct. And who was running the country during the middle of the year?
Laurie Oakes.
Correct. And who is running the country now? Elves. Did you say elves?
No, sorry, glass of water.
OK, fine.
Julia Gillard.
Julia Gillard,
the
correct.
Prime Minister, yeah.
Correct. Julia Gillard has said that Julian Assange has acted illegally in releasing material on Wikileaks.
Yep.
What Australian law has Mr Assange broken?
Oh, I don't know. I'd need to see the actual cable from the United States Secretary of State. That the detail would be in there.
Correct. What is cricket?
Pass.
Correct. What does FIFA stand for?
Bloody near anything by the look of it.
Correct. Who is Sepp Blatter?
Oh, I don't know, but he doesn't sound well, does he?
Correct. The Australian Parliament is not sitting over the Christmas New Year period. Who will be running the country during this period?
I don't know, elves?
Did you say elves?
No, sorry, just a glass of water. I've no idea, Brian.
Correct. OK, and a Merry Christmas to you.
A Merry Christmas to you too, Brian.
And to you lot.
And to them.
Who are they, by the way?
Elves. And now a few parting words. We kicked off the National 7:30 report on December 4, 1995. And within weeks found ourselves in the election race that saw Paul Keating's political career end and John Howard's long reign begin. A lot has happened since, the tragedies and the triumphs, the big landmark moments and the little things that nonetheless brighten our lives. I've enjoyed your company and I hope you've enjoyed mine. There's a great team of people in this place, but you know that, and you can expect good things from 7:30 with Lee Sales and Chris Uhlmann next year. I can honestly say it's been an honour and a privilege to share this space with you. We can get together again on Four Corners next year, but now, as they say, the time has come to say goodnight. Have a great Christmas.